got to get our fix every day, or maybe someone's coercing us into doing it, especially since it's not for survival or sustenance, right? And you know, there doesn't seem like there's any real reason, any real world reason why you keep going back to these boxes, but you do. So either somebody's forcing you to do it, or you're some kind of weird junkie. And you know, more and more I think about this, maybe that one's the right answer, right? You're crazy, and so you must be some kind of addict, right? And in a sense, I guess, we're kind of in trance. We're caught up, almost like you're asleep. I know you're not asleep, because sometimes I can snap you out of it, but it's almost like you're asleep. The only thing I can compare it to is when I'm taking my little cat naps, and I'm about to fall asleep. You know, that kind of, that border moment between awakeness and sleep, and I feel in this like weird world, right? And that's really the only thing I can compare it to, is this kind of like border moment between sleep and awake, right when I'm starting to enter the dream world. But otherwise, you know, but that doesn't really make sense either, because you know, you might be using it to try to get yourself to sleep, but if that's the case, why do you watch it at such a loud volume? And why do you watch it for so long? I mean, do you have trouble sleeping? Maybe we really need to get you some mental help, because there's clearly something going on here, right? And when we were talking about these things, we kind of joked in through this list of you know, differences. It made me think, and I've been wanting to bring up this term a lot in class, and I finally found kind of the perfect way to incorporate that, and that is this term called Meatspace, M-E-A-T space, Meatspace, right? And the thing is, my cat 100% lives in Meatspace, okay? Meatspace is the here and now, right? It's the physical environment immediately around you that you're connected to, right? And I think it's a great term too. It's the space of flesh, right? And the space of bodies. And it's a great term for thinking about cats because, right, I mean, especially this one, Cosmos, that's our guinea pig that he's chasing there. He's 100% concerned about meat, right? I mean, if he's not sleeping, he's hunting. And he's killed, you know, many a vermin in his day. The number of species are increasing almost daily, it seems like. But you know, his whole world is Meatspace. It's consumed by the here and now. They don't plan for the future. They don't think too much about the past, right? They certainly don't sit around and daydream the same way we do. They're really, you know, and we can think of the Meatspace as the immediate, right? What's immediately around us, and the tactile, right? Things that we can touch, things that, you know, meat, body, tissue, material, right? Meatspace. But usually when we are watching our televisions, talking on our cell phones, using the internet, etc., we're not in Meatspace, right? We're inhabiting what we might call virtual space. We're off in another world. That's why, in some sense, it looks like we're in trance. It's another time, usually. Sometimes a galaxy a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, or sometimes, you know, some distant place in the future, or some alternative universe or alternative world. It's another time. It's another place. Sometimes it's real. It's a real time or place, right? Like, I send my voice to Taiwan to talk to my dad, and he sends his voice back over the phone lines to the United States, so we can talk. So that's real. It's a real place, right, being sent. Sometimes it's virtual, things like Second Life, or sometimes it's fantasy world, I guess is a better way to put it. Some things like Second Life, or you know, other video games to create these kind of virtual fantasy worlds that we can inhabit. So these virtual worlds aren't always not real. Sometimes they're very real. You know, your Facebook network is made up of real people, but still, when you go to Facebook, you're kind of inhabiting this virtual space, right? Sometimes they can be very far away from us, galaxy far, far away. Sometimes they can be very close to us. right? Talking to my dad on the phone. Even, I can use the internet to virtually explore the San Angelo Mall or something like that, right? Close. These things, aren't always about the present, like my cat, right? In Meatspace, it's all about the present, all about the here and now. So there's, in virtual world though, it can be about the past, it can be about the future. It can be about something that happened earlier today that I'm kind of daydreaming about, or something that I desire to happen, right? Something that I might want to happen eventually. These things can be materialized or imagined. That is, Second Life is a materialized virtual world. Okay? It exists. That Second Life world existed. There's something to it. It's materialized. But on the other hand, sometimes, I kind of do the same thing daydreaming. I imagine this kind of story playing out in my head. And it's not really materialized, it just takes place in my head. But I'm doing the same, and once again inhabiting that virtual space by doing that. And in fact, I think that's a pretty good way to talk about it, is to describe these virtual spaces and what we're doing when we go to these virtual spaces as an extension of fantasizing or daydreaming. So, for a long time, before computers, before television, before cell phones, before all these electronic contrivances, we've always had this ability to go inhabit these virtual spaces, right? I mean, books are a good example of which you're reading a book, kind of going to the world of that book, right? The story taking place in your mind. But even before books, telling stories around the fire, or daydreaming, dreaming and daydreaming itself, as this kind of natural process of inhabiting a virtual space, right? Of my mind drifting off to another time and place and kind of seeing or experiencing a story taking place there. And, those experiences a lot of times feel as real as any other experience, right? If you're daydreaming about falling in love with someone, that flutter that you get in your heart kind of feels the same as the flutter you might get if you were actually falling in love with someone, right? Or if you get sad over a movie, that sadness feels the same as a sadness that you might have for something that happened in your real life. We might talk about there's differences in degree and depth, and it's easier to get over a movie than it is the death of a loved one. But the feelings feel very much the same, right? We have this ability to use virtual worlds, to use these fantasy worlds to make us feel real things, right? And I think that's something that really a cat doesn't have the ability to do. This whole process that we kind of rock through with the cat is maybe an example of methodologies called phenomenology. Let me write that on the board so I can find it right. Phenomenology is concerned with experience itself, right? The phenomenon. So a lot of times phenomenology wants to know, what the experience is in itself, how we, as embodied individuals perceive things when we go through kind of our everyday life, right? And so a lot of times with phenomenology, they'll take an example of, usually I haven't heard the cat very often, but like a primitive person, right, comes and watches a movie for the first time. What would, what are the kind of remarkable features about watching that movie? Why is it so different for them, right? And they try to get to kind of what is this experience, what are the kind of nuts and bolts of this experience? What's fundamental about this experience? And so we're talking about the phenomenon itself of, just looking at my computer or watching a movie or talking on my cell phone, right? How it changes, how I perceive it as I'm experiencing it, and how it works. And a lot of media studies scholars use phenomenology as kind of a background for understanding how media affect us in the ways we communicate and stuff. One is, McLuhan kind of has a little bit of phenomenological approach when he talks about media, but one in particular is this guy Don Eady, who writes a lot of stuff about phenomenology of different media and the way that